Let's jump over and talk about the Bears and the Falcons. Now, Bears are 2-0, Falcons are 0-2, and yet the Falcons are still favored to win. And I get it. I understand. This is a weird game. High over-under for a game with the Bears. Bears typically have much lower over-unders because they're more defensive battles, but 47.5, I think, goes to show that Vegas just really trusts what Matt Ryan is slinging right now, and he's been really good. So our implied point total is roughly 25-22. Again, Falcons slated by 3. The Bears have been pretty good across the board with the exception of the tight end position, keeping quarterbacks, running backs, receivers in their place for fantasy, whereas the Falcons have been an absolute gold mine for opposing fantasy players. The Falcons are giving up the most points to the quarterback position, the 4th most to tight ends, 5th most to wide receivers, and 11th most to running backs. Again, similar thing that we've talked about in other previews. These are just 2 data points. The Falcons did play the Cowboys and the Seahawks, who are both very high potent offenses. So while I don't expect the Falcons defense to ever be really good this year, this may be a bit of data skew. So we'll keep that in mind. Obviously, we're not expecting Mitchell Trubisky to go out and throw 5 touchdowns. I hope I'm wrong. But yeah. So in terms of who we're starting this week, you could talk me into playing Mitchell Trubisky in like DFS, but there's no way I'm going to trust him in my normal lineup. This just has the makings of a potential game where it just is flat. There isn't nearly as much offense as we were thinking. Like this could most certainly hit the under, and unless the Falcons defense truly is one of the worst in the league and the Bears can run all over them, I could definitely see this being like a game where the Bears just try to run the clock out with David Montgomery. I mean, Allen Robinson is a great start this week. The Falcons just have been very, very poor at defending receivers, and Allen Robinson has still been getting a ton of targets even though he hasn't had a lot of fantasy production. So got to trust him one more time. This is the week he turns things around, but there's really no one else on the Bears offense that I'm really trusting to throw out there. I mean, you can play it risky and play the Bears defense, but if the Falcons go off and score a ton of points, you're going to regret that one for sure. Anthony Miller last week gave you a goose egg, so he's not someone I'm dropping, but I'm not playing him at this point. Darnell Mooney had the touchdown, but he only had 3 targets on the day. Jimmy Graham, just Tariq Cohen is still super inefficient. We're not starting Cordero Patterson. So David Montgomery is a great play this week. Falcons have been, really poor at stopping the run. And then Allen Robinson, again, should be a really good play. I'm not trusting anyone else on the Bears. On the Falcons side, I mean, this one's pretty easy. Matt Ryan, we can't bench him until he shows us a reason to. I mean, he's done this to us every other year where he's had a phenomenal fantasy point total. He's had in 2016 and 2018, he was the number 2 quarterback on the year. Definitely looks like he's trying to do that again and has been really productive, although, and he hasn't really, I don't think he's thrown a single interception yet. No, he threw the one in the game against the Seahawks where it was just like a air it out at the end of the game. It was a meaningless throw. Other than that, Matt Ryan has been pretty, consistent. In years past, he's thrown a lot of interceptions, so that's a good trend. We'll see if that switches over when he plays a tougher defense like the Bears. But Matt Ryan, I still like this week. Fire him up. We'll see what the Bears can do. Of course, you're starting Calvin Ridley, the number 1 receiver in fantasy right now. Julio Jones dealing with that hamstring injury is a little bit concerning to me, but I feel like we've seen this song and dance with Julio Jones pretty much his entire career. Like, I don't really remember a season that he didn't pretty much live on the injury report and still managed to play through almost every single ailment he's had, unless it was like a true serious injury, like when he suffered that Jones fracture. So we'll see. Monitor tomorrow on Friday. This video will go up on Friday, so maybe by the time you hear this video, Julio Jones will have already either been ruled as practicing on Friday, or if he's out again, that might be a little bit more concerning. But even then, does Julio Jones really need to practice? He's been playing with Matt Ryan for so long at this point. He could still go even if he doesn't practice on Friday. So if Julio Jones is active, I'm playing him. That's a matter of fact. If he's out, then you can swap him with Russell Gage, which we'll get to in a second. And then we mentioned the Bears have been a little bit weaker at stopping the tight end, so I think Hayden Hurst is a good play this week. Now, Todd Gurley is someone that you probably don't have the luxury of benching, but he has not been good. He has been very inefficient. He has not been able to create a lot of missed tackles. He hasn't been able to do much with the work that he's been given, and he hasn't been giving the work that we were hoping for. Well, I guess I should take that back. He's had a decent bit of opportunities. He just hasn't really done anything from a fantasy perspective with it. So can he turn that around against the Bears with a decent front seven? If you have the luxury of being able to bench him, hopefully you had a guy like James Robinson and you were able to play him tonight. If you have the luxury, I would wait it out and see how this game goes, because this could be a bad situation for Gurley year round, but you're probably in this situation where you have to start him and then you're just going to pray that he scores a touchdown this week. Whereas Russell Gage has been incredibly interesting, 12 targets week 1, 9 targets week 2. And, we're not expecting there to be nearly as much pass volume in this one because the Bears are not the prolific offense that the Cowboys and the Seahawks are. So if Julio Jones plays, I'm probably going to hold off on playing the wide receiver 3 here. But if Julio Jones is out, and maybe you have both Julio Jones and Russell Gage, I think Russell Gage becomes a really nice start if Julio is out. So that's pretty much the only situation I'm really playing Gage, unless I'm in a super deep league. But I'm going to try to keep him off my lineup this week, because at some point that it's going to start polarizing. We've seen this a lot with teams like the Falcons, where there's, some weeks where other guys perform, but it never stays consistent. And at some point you get the two guys that rise to the top. And I think that will, of course, still be Julio and Ridley. And then I don't really think the Falcons really have a fantasy defense that anyone rosters, but you're definitely not starting them even against Mitch Trubisky. Overall, I like the Falcons to win this one, edge the Bears out 27-24. So obviously, I think there would be some points being scored in this one. I don't have a lot of confidence in this prediction either, because there's a lot of ambiguity here. Mitchell Trubisky has looked bad, but he's still managed to win 2 games, whereas Matt Ryan has looked good, but the defense has been so bad that they're 0-2, and that stupid onside kick that someone needs to be fired for. But can the Falcons pull this one out at home? I think they can, but I do think it will be a close battle.